So hello and welcome to session 6 of Talking Taking Action. Thank you all for coming and giving up a bit of time on this beautiful summer's evening. Tonight we're talking about nature-based solutions to the climate emergency. We've got two really brilliant sets of speakers that we're really excited to hear from. But before we do, we're just going to do a few quick introductions. Just so you guys, for anybody who's not met us before. There's 3 organisations involved in organising Talking Taking Action. My name's Alison and I'm from Oak Tree Sustainable Living Centre. We're based in South East Leeds and we help people with advice on low impact living, carbon reduction, that kind of thing. We've also got Pete here from Speak Carbon. Speak Carbon run training workshops to help people learn about the climate crisis. And we have Ivana from St Nick's in York, who a few of you will already know. And St Nick's is a wildlife, a sort of nature reserve, working on nature and well-being and lots of other brilliant stuff to do with, again, sustainability and low impact living and things like that in York. So before we go on to our brilliant speakers for this evening, one of the key things that we do at Talking Taking Action, for those of you that haven't attended before, is after we've heard from our speakers, we have a question and answer session, and then we do pledges around the night's subject to try and get people to pledge to take action to reduce their carbon footprint in one way or another. And last month was a little bit different in that it was more around looking after ourselves and our mental well-being while we're sort of tackling these big issues. And so these are the pledges you can see on the screen that we had last time. So if there's anybody here who was here last week and is feeling brave, who would like to speak up or even pop something in the chat if you prefer about how your pledges are going, or maybe it's something that you pledged offline, you didn't put it on the screen, that's absolutely fine, or any kind of comments or anything like that to do with well-being and pledges that you would like to speak up now, then now's your chance. Who's going to be brave? Have we got any hands up? Debbie, I think you were here last time. Have you managed to spot any peonies coming into flower? Oh, we've got Jamie. What would you like to say, Jamie?
Okay, hi everyone. So I'll just say I think it's like work in progress. What I have done is kind of cut down the amount of different things I appear to be doing, which is completely unsustainable. So I guess that's a start. But yeah, work in progress. Brilliant.
Thanks for that, Jamie. I think that is a really good place to start, isn't it? Just do less sometimes, do fewer things better. I guess we spread ourselves too thinly sometimes, don't we? And it doesn't always go well. Well, I mean, my pledge, I have to confess, was to cycle more, and I've done less of it, if anything. So that's not particularly good. I've been doing more work and less cycling. So that's sort of the opposite of what we were talking about. But I keep meaning to sort of try and switch that balance up a bit, and I'm hoping to do that when I've got over this sort of very busy period that I'm in at the minute. But yeah, I guess it's one of those things, as long as we're thinking about it and keeping it in mind, then that's better than nothing. So unless there's anybody else, I'm just going to have a little click through.
Just on the chat, Debbie did come back, but she's having a tea because it is tea time, isn't it? So
it is.
But she had a wonderful talk today about Zen and gardening, so mixing mental well-being with doing the garden. Such a different outlook on life, she says. So yeah, sort of mixing the things that you do along with that. And there's a cycle ride tomorrow that we've been invited to as well from Debbie.
Lovely. Any information you can put about that in the chat, that'd be great, Debbie. Ivana, did you have something you wanted to talk about that's happening at St Nick's that fits in with this?
Yes, no, actually, I should have mentioned. So we've got a few events that might be of interest about sort of immersing yourself in nature. There's actually a mindfulness workshop on the 17th of July, which I'm so excited to be taking part in because that's something I keep meaning to try out and I keep failing. So that's called Happy by Nature. There's also bushcraft one-day course in the following day. So there's a few things and some family activities. So I'll pop a link to our events page on the chat. But yeah, there's a few things that might maybe entice some of you to come and discover St Nick's.
Fantastic. Any opportunity to be out in nature in this lovely weather, I think that should be taken with both hands. Brilliant. Right then, so unless we've got any others, I think we're going to move on to our first speaker. Lyndon, I'm going to throw you in at the deep end by just chucking your slides up on the screen, if that's all right. And I'll hand over you to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of context about why you're here this evening.
Okay, Alison, do you want me to, I can share screen at this end and just run the slides myself, or do I just need to ask you to shift you on us?
Yeah, you can just do a Chris Whitty if you want, or just kind of make a noise that, you know, I'll hopefully be able to tell when you want to move on, but if I'm not,
okay, cool.
Just give me a nudge.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. As you can see, my name is Lyndon Marquis. I am the Communications Officer for Yorkshire Peat Partnership. Next slide, please. We are an umbrella organisation restoring upland peatland in the Yorkshire Dales and North York Moors National Parks, Nidderdale and Forest of Bowland areas of outstanding natural beauty. And we've done a little bit in the South Pennines, although we have not been active in that area for quite a while now. This has come about because in the early noughties, there was a recognition of the parlous state of our upland peatlands due to agricultural policy from the 50s and 60s. In the Peak District, this was addressed by the Moors for the Future Partnership. In the North Pennines, by the North Pennines AONB Partnership, but that left a big gap in between the northern end of the South Pennines and the southern end of the North Pennines, and Yorkshire Peat Partnership was formed to fill that gap. Next slide, please. So that's just a quick look at what I'm going to be talking about tonight. How does peat form? How much is there? Why is that important? And what are we doing about it? Next slide, please. How does peat form? So peat is an organic substrate. It's formed from partially decomposed plant material, predominantly sphagnum mosses, but also some dwarf shrubs and cotton grasses. If you look here, this really quite bright green stuff with the little spores on it, that is a species called Sphagnum phallax. And over on this side, this kind of reddy greeny thing is Sphagnum subnitans, I think. And there's cotton grass in here, and that's crowberry down there. There's around 30 species of sphagnum in the UK, each of which occupy their own ecological niche. Sphagnum's an amazing plant. It can hold up to 20 times its own weight in water, and it exploits this trait to waterlog its environment so that it's more suitable for itself and for other very water-tolerant species. Peatlands are waterlogged and acidic because of sphagnum mosses. Sphagnum is also a bryophyte. I mean, it's got no roots. As it grows up towards the sun, the top of the plant shades out the bottom. The top carries on growing, but the bottom portion dies. Next slide, please. Because sphagnum has created waterlogged, anaerobic and acidic conditions, the dead vegetation does not decompose properly, and that becomes peat. The peat builds up over time on an average of about 1 millimetre per year. So that goes more slowly up at altitude where it's colder and faster down towards sea level. This gully you can see here is about 4 meters deep. So up here, that's actually living sphagnum. And down here, that's 4,000 years old. Next slide, please. How much peat is there? So there's the UK, self-evidently. There's around 3 million hectares of peatland habitat in the UK. That's peatland habitat, so we're not including depleted peatland soils in agricultural use. Up here in the north of Scotland, you can see the flow country, and then we've got the Highlands. Here's the Pennines, North York Moors, there's a great fen. That's the Somerset levels. There's 3 main peatland habitat types in the UK. There's blanket bog and lowland raised mire. They're both ombrotrophic habitats, and that means that they get all their nutrients and all their moisture just from precipitation, from rain, snow, hail, mist. They're both very low nutrient, acidic, wet habitats. In England, blanket bog tends to form at above 200 meters, and lowland raised mire, as its name implies, is a lowland habitat. Up in the north end of Scotland, up there in the flow country, you will get blanket bog at sea level, but here in England, it's an upland thing. The third habitat type is fen. So there's the Great Fen, there's the Norfolk Broads. Unlike ombrotrophic habitats, fen has some interaction with groundwater, so it's got slightly different nutrient profile. generally speaking, a wider range of plant species just because you've got a wider range of nutrients. Next slide, please. So there's Yorkshire. That's our operational area, Northern Yorkshire. Just to give you some idea of scale, I should have made this more evident, but this ring around York, that is the boundary of the City of York Council. So that's about 30,000 hectares. Our operational area, which covers the Dales here, there's Nidderdale, North York Moors. There's around 95,000 hectares of blanket bog in there. So 3 times the size of York. Next slide, please. So why is peat important? Well, peat is carbon. All of the carbon you saw in that that gully, that 4 meters, that's 4,000 years worth of carbon, and it's there in the peat. All the carbon that was taken up by those plants while they were alive, it's held there in the peat. In comparison, a carbon absorbed by a tree will stay there for the life of the tree. So that could be 500 years, maybe 600 years, probably tops. I'm not having a go at trees, by the way. This is just the way it is. Carbon stored in peat will stay there for millennia. Peatlands cover 3% of the Earth's surface, but hold something like 30% of the soil carbon. They're our largest terrestrial carbon store. UK peatlands hold more carbon than the forests of UK, France and Germany combined. In the 50s and 60s, we incentivized land managers to drain blanket bog to graze sheep. If you see these lines here that are too parallel to be natural, they're called grips. So they're drainage ditches that were basically ploughed into the surface of the bog in order to drain it. As the water table dropped, the bog vegetation, typical of blanket bog, dried and then died, exposing the peat to erosion by wind and rain. This led to the formation of these gullies. So all these complex winding channels you can see in the surface of the bog. They're gullies, and basically they're exacerbating the situation by speeding the rate of drainage. They're whipping rain off the peatlands really, really quickly down into our river systems. We estimate there's nearly 47 million tonnes of carbon locked up in Yorkshire's blanket bog, and really that needs to stay there. However, as matters stand, it's being swept into the atmosphere and out into our river systems. Next slide, please. Did I say next slide? Sorry. Thank you very much. As well as being carbon, peat is a lot of water. Fun fact, there are more solids in 1 pint of milk than there are in 1 pint of peat. There's a misconception that peat will soak up water like a sponge and hold it up on the hilltops. That's not quite the case. What happens is the surface roughness from the vegetation slows the movement of water across a bog, whereas on bare peat, that might just as well be running across glass. It just sweeps across really quickly. Research from University of Manchester shows that restored blanket bog versus the degraded blanket bog we've just been looking at reduces the peak volume of flow in heavy rain incidents by 57%, and it triples the lag time between peak rainfall and peak flow down into our river systems. So as these heavy rain events become more and more frequent, really we need to make sure that our upland blanket bog is in decent nick and is slowing the flow of rainfall off the tops. Next slide, please. So what are we doing about this? Well, give peat a chance. The key to peatland restoration is getting the water table back up close to the surface. And we do that by blocking grips and gullies and minimizing flow across the surface of the bare peat. Now we can do that with stone dams or timber dams, peat dams, and even coir logs. We have to use the right dam for the right technique. In grips, it's going to be peat dams. In deep gullies, it's going to be timber dams. Across bare peat, we tend to use these coir logs. So what you can see here is we've created almost a sort of lagoon. It's a series of pools with coir logs across what was a big pan of bare peat. By disrupting the surface flow and trapping sediment, we allow vegetation to re-establish, because sphagnum has no roots, moving water is a really big issue for it. It can't recolonize bare peat while there's water running across it. But here you can see that Sphagnum cuspidatum is growing in these new bog pools, and you can even see it growing up the side of the coir logs here. I was really excited when I saw that, because those coir logs had been in for less than a year when that photograph was taken. So we can make a difference really quite quickly. Once we've addressed the hydrology of a site, we look to re-establish typical blanket bog revegetation by replanting. So in this shot, you can see Matthew's thumb, but also this is a clump of sphagnum moss, judging by how even it is. I think that's probably been farmed rather than cut. And we've put that into brash. So brash is a mixture of cut heather and cotton grasses, other bog plants, and that just helps the plants that we're putting in key into the surface of the bog. In our previous restoration season, we blocked 83 kilometres of gullies and grips and planted 126,000 sphagnum plugs and 86,000 cotton grass plugs. So peatland restoration it's time consuming. It's an iterative process. We have to keep going back and checking and seeing what more needs to be done. But functioning blanket bog can continue to take in carbon as it has done for thousands of years and keep it locked up, and helps really dramatically slow the flow of rainwater off the tops, and so can help to mitigate flooding further downstream. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for your time. If you'd like to know more about us, you can head to our website, which is ypppartnership.org.uk, or you can find us on Twitter at ypp_peat, and we're also on Facebook and Vimeo. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Lyndon. That's fantastic. If anyone's got any questions, either just take a note of them or pop them in the chat and we can go over them in the Q&A afterwards. We're now going to move on to our next set of speakers from Make It Wild. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, and over to you. You're there, Helen and or Christopher. Who's going to take the mantle?
Right. Okay. Yes. Oh, the slides are looking a bit different with the
change of font or something.
Change. Yeah, the fonts have all changed, but never mind. I still know what I was supposed to be saying.
Oh, really?
So I'm Helen. This is Chris, and we are husband and wife team who run our small business, Make It Wild, and we were invited to talk. Thank you very much. So next slide, please. Oh, this isn't quite working.
No,
because look, the title's there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the title of this slide was
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is it gone a bit funny?
So I don't know what's happened to the formatting, but never mind, it'll be fine. So we set up Make It Wild really in response to the climate and ecological emergency that we're facing. So we were getting increasingly worried about the loss of space for nature in particular, and all of this terrible loss of wildlife that Earth has lost 60% of its wildlife since 1970. So that's in our lifetime. More than half of wildlife has been lost, and it's similar figures for the UK. And next slide, please. I should say on that subject that most of these are down to human activities, so exploitation, habitat degradation, etc. And this is something that you, within your group, you know all too well, that in parallel with this and linked to it, we have the spectre of climate change. And here's a graph that you'll all be familiar with, the parts per million of carbon dioxide rising very much in line and correlating with the temperature rise that we're seeing on the planet. So thinking of nature-based solutions for this. Next slide, please.
Oh, yeah, over to me. This is just, well, I say some, but it's the enormous range of benefits of trees in the landscape. You can see all the different contributions they make. Of course, the fundamental thing for the whole of the earth is that they produce oxygen that we need to respire, but of course, and take in carbon dioxide, which of course we're going to talk more about. But they do all these other things as well, and provide the habitat for all our wildlife and food production for so many species, and enhance biodiversity enormously. But they produce all sorts of things, shade and stop flooding and the beauty of woodlands. There's so much that trees offer, and they stabilize soils as well, which is another major problem that we face on Earth. So trees are the answer to so much. Oh, next slide.
We've animated these slides.
Oh yes, so
yeah.
And in particular, this is where we've really wanted to make a contribution with Make It Wild, is that we know that by planting trees, you can kickstart that the whole of nature will arrive, and the ecology that it will support is vast. So it'll enhance the biodiversity, and of course, in the process, capture carbon, almost like as a byproduct. If we plant trees because we want to offer all these things and primarily space for nature, but as a wonderful byproduct, it's locking in carbon, as your previous speaker said, for the life of the tree. Next, please. Yeah. And this is an area of the River Nid near Kirkhamerton, near York, and you can see it meandering around around that field. That's a picture from 2002, an aerial photograph of a 26-acre field, which we were fortunate to acquire some 8 years later than this picture, and we began our project of planting trees. This is in 2000, this photograph 2013, I think it was, the clip, yeah. And we'd put 20,000 trees and some ponds and some meadows and so on. You can start to see the vegetation changing, and then another slide on top will show that by, oh yeah, there you are, it's slightly out of the picture. In 2018, you can see the canopy has formed, and these trees grew incredibly quickly because it's in the floodplain of the River Nid, and so we saw a change very dramatically. You can see some clearings there as well, and the result in the change in biodiversity was absolutely stunning. I think the next slide, please. Oh yes, well we've recently reached a milestone in our actions of 50,000 trees we've managed to plant since we began a decade ago, and we're determined to carry on creating new woodlands as we progress. Next slide, please. Over to Helen. Yeah. Oh, you play the.
Do you want me to play the video? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, please.
We planted 20,000 trees here, and we were amazed by the explosion in biodiversity that happens when you plant trees on this sort of scale. Once the flowers arrive, you get insects and birds of prey and mammals, and nature just arrives.
Okay, yeah, click next slide, please. Yeah, so I think we're stretching the limits of what can be done with.
Is that the same one again? Slide, no, that's the same one. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so next slide, please. Yeah. So clearly we're stretching the limits of what can be done on sharing a screen with PowerPoint, but so yeah, so that was just a short section of a film we had made to sort of explain what we're doing. So Sylvan, that we showed you first of all, we planted 20,000 trees there, and that was literally a family project. We were fortunate enough to be in a position to do an action like this. So we bought land to give back to nature and planted all those trees. And as I said in the film, hopefully you could hear it, that it absolutely kick-started biodiversity, and it brought back insects and birds that would never have been there when it was simply a scrubby old field. So more recently, 3 years ago, we were again, our careers had changed in the background such that we had a bit more time, and we decided to do it again, but bigger. So we bought Bankwoods, which is 111 acres, where we've spent the day and only got back about 10 minutes before we started. So we had a bit of an Exmoor pony drama situation. We're rewilding there, where we've got about 60 acres under rewilding management. We have belted Galloway cattle and Exmoor ponies there as our conservation grazing crew, and we've also planted a lot of trees. So we planted, is it about 8,000 in total? Yeah. So there's 5,000 in this clearing in the middle, and then another few thousand over to the left, the top left corner, which is against the road between Harrogate and Peatland Bridge. And as you can see, importantly for our main purpose of biodiversity and supporting nature, the trees really reconnect the separated sections of ancient woodland, which we are fortunate enough to be the current custodians of. So we're reconnecting the ancient woodland and planting a sort of belt along the side as well. Next slide, please. And so this is the land adjoining Bankwoods, which serendipitously came up for sale, and it was, you know, to have land connected to each other, but was too good to miss, really. So again, we've planted up about half of it, and half is under grazing by our belted Galloways and some of our farmer partners, Angus calves. So as you can see, we plant sort of naturalistically. They're not in rows. We do clearings. There'll be ponds. The area, the sort of yellowy area, is actually a sort of naturally boggy section, and you know, we do rides and clearings and so on. They're mixed native deciduous trees of all sort of local types. So that's just an aerial shot of some planting. Next slide, please. Oh dear. Okay, so this, here's some other things that we do, which should have been written on the bullet points down the side. Something's gone wrong with our formatting. So we dig ponds, and here we are next to a pond that we dug. This is the family. Our two daughters are there as well. They help when they can. The next click, please. We put up bird boxes. We've got about 30 bird boxes, which we monitor. We've been taught how to sort of safely monitor them. So we have about 80% occupancy of our bird boxes, and so we've supported bringing into the world lots and lots of hundreds really of blue tits, great tits, pied fly catchers, nuthatchers, red start, yeah. So that's good. And the next one, please. Yeah, so we protect our ancient woodland. We've got about 20 acres of ancient woodland, which looks like this in May. And unfortunately, we have deer in there, which are very cute but very naughty, and they eat any seedlings that grow. So this is a problem sort of nationwide for ancient woodland, that you have the mature trees, sort of 100-year plus, but really nothing younger than that. So we've actually invested in deer fencing to keep them out, and hopefully we'll get some natural regeneration. Next one, please. And this is, yeah, so this one is to show our rewilding. And yeah, so here's our belted Galloway, who are our conservation grazing crew. So they've brought back loads of wildflowers that were never there when it was grazed by sheep. And also behind them, you can see some natural regeneration, which is the sort of holy grail of rewilding. So we leave the natural scrub that occurs, gorse and hawthorn or whatever, and as if by magic, birch trees arrive. Of course, this happened. We haven't owned this land only 3 years, 4 years, 3 or 4 years. But you know, this is sort of natural regeneration in action. Behind them, there's a very wet bit of land, and actually we've got older trees, seedlings just growing, which never had grown before. So under conservation grazing type of management, you get all those native trees coming back. So there's some of the other things that we do. Next slide, and I don't know how this is going to work. Okay, so the next.
Well, we do of course need to keep funding all of this conservation work we're doing, and as I was saying before, that the carbon is a sort of welcome byproduct. I mean, it's welcome on so many levels, but if from our perspective, it means that we are able to offer some of that for people to offset their own emissions, whether that be personal or through their business activities, and they can purchase individual trees or small clumps of groves, or even an entire woodland, depending on the scale of the offset that they want to make. And those trees will be looked after and kept in perpetuity. They're not ever going to be felled for timber. They are woodlands created for wildlife, but and that will lock up the timber for the life of those trees, many of which will be many hundreds of years, hopefully the future ancient woodlands that we're trying to create in Nidderdale. And so we can offer that to people, and people can spend as little as a few pounds and offset some carbon, or indeed greater amounts, and that's part of the sales that we make. And that's an example of a badge that they can then use on their own social media or emails or websites or whatever.
So importantly and uniquely in the world of carbon offsetting, we actually have all of our trees photographed by drone, which is the picture on the right. So we, as part of the certification, we send people an aerial photograph of the very trees that they're paying for. So on the left of the certificate, it's not very clear on here, but the trees that person is paying for are highlighted in turquoise. And this is on the right is Leslie, our colleague, flying the drone to photograph all the trees. And we come up with a drone map, and we identify each tree individually. And so we know which trees each client has paid for, and I believe we're the only people in the world of carbon offsetting that do that. We also offer tree dedications, generally, you know, for gifts in memory of and that kind of thing as well. And I realized we were so compelled to make this talk short. We haven't told you where we do all this, mostly in Nidderdale, but our first land was in Kirkhamerton, which was those aerial shots we showed you of the River Nid. So that was our first land, Kirkhamerton near York, and now we've got the 2 pieces of land I've mentioned and some other smaller projects in Nidderdale. So we are slowing the flow here with we do leaky dams and all kinds of things, planting our trees. We're slowing the flow into the River Nid in Nidderdale so it doesn't flood our field, our trees in Kirkhamerton. So that all works quite neatly. So next slide, please. So we have a lot of volunteering opportunities, and everybody's favourite thing to do is plant trees. And this day of the second picture was just a horrid, foggy, rainy, terrible day. And we were working in, very, very wet, and a very, very wet area to plant this. It's going to be like a massive thicket, really. Chris calls it the super hedge. But it will really help, draw up some of that water. It's not peat, by the way, just before anybody worries that we're planting trees on peat. We always do environmental impact assessments, and it's just a bit of a field, really. So when people are planting trees, they smile, even if it's foggy and cold and wet and horrible. Next slide, please. And other opportunities for volunteering, you can just keep clicking through this one. When you've planted 20,000 trees, in 7 years' time comes the task of gathering up all the tree tubes, which we diligently do. We've got a bit of a sort of moral dilemma here, because we try and be as close as we can to plastic free or single-use plastic free in our lives, but then we've got 20,000 tree tubes, but we absolutely gather every single one. We've almost done it, actually, I think, at Sylvan, very close to. We also it's gone a bit weird. Oh, there we are. So we have a problem with Himalayan balsam at Sylvan, which comes in on the river. So we hand pull that. We've both learnt to scythe, so we scythe it as well. We don't like to use herbicides at all. There was a picture of, I can't remember what the first one was, but this is our volunteers digging a pond, and they've made the most fantastic wildlife pond. So amazing what you can do with a bunch of willing people. Next one, please.
Our strategy is to
yeah,
do more of the same, because the more trees we plant, the more rewilding of space that we have, then the more that nature will benefit. But the other thing we want to do actually is not try and do everything ourselves. We would like to actually help others and inspire others to do some of the things that we're doing now, even if it's just an individual putting a few trees in their garden, or it's a bigger enterprise planting 10,000 trees. Because actually the change that we've got to make is massive, and we all need to do it together.
I think we've just got one final slide at the end. Yeah, so that's our website and our email addresses if anybody wanted to get in touch. So that was all we were going to say. Thank you. I saw one question pop up. Do you want me to wait till any particular point to answer that, or?
No, that's fine. You go ahead with that. I think we've got a couple and I've got a few written down. So yeah, go ahead with that.
Okay, so the one I saw, there may have been others, was the tree tube question. We reuse as many as we can, because of course we're on this rolling program of planting. Well, we're planting 10,000 a year. Chris pledged at the launch of the Northern Forest to plant 100,000 trees in the decade. So we're on track for that. So it's at least 10,000 a year. So we reuse as many as we can. Ones which we have been fully split. We don't, because we plant on such mass scale, we can't use those again, because the fiddly, time-consuming nature of putting the wire around or reusing those is just too much. But we offer those to any voluntary groups, anybody actually, and we've got all sorts of people that come and take those at a smaller scale tree planting. So we offer those for reuse. And then any that are left over, we were a trial site for the docx recycling scheme. Wow. So they took a few thousand of those, and we've signed up to their bigger scheme, although it's financially a bit prohibitive. It's very expensive to have them done. But the other one, any that we need to dispose of, go to the energy from waste plant. So they go into that energy from waste stream. So that's really all the different things in the order that we do them: reuse them first, offer them to others, recycle, and then energy from waste. But we are very excited to be a trial site for cardboard tree tubes, because, as I said, the whole thing of plastic tree tubes is a bit of a moral dilemma, because we don't really like plastic. And we trialled some cardboard ones last year, which were an absolute disaster. Bent, fell over, killed the tree, fell apart in the wind and rain of Nidderdale. So they were absolutely useless. We've got some other ones that we've trialled the last planting season, which seem a bit better, don't they? Those green ones. So we'll see how they go. But even more exciting, we've got our mitts on one tree tube, which is made from sheep's wool and cashew nut oil. And I want to find out the sort of carbon footprint of the cashew nut oil, where that comes from. But the fact that they will biodegrade is a massive bonus. So we want to do a bit more investigation about those and get a few more of them to trial. We've got one at the moment. So something like that is going to be the future for tree guards. If you're planting the odd one, you can plant it among brambles and imitate nature and all that kind of thing. When you're trying to plant as many as we are, you do need guards, especially as we have the deer, which I mentioned. So yeah, that's the potted story of the deer of tree tubes.
That's fantastic, especially those cashew ones. If you just leave them and they go away, sort of thing. You don't.
Yeah, well, the question is, how quickly do they go away? That's the big
not
question.
too quickly.
Yeah. If they biodegrade too quickly, they're useless, because the deer and hare and everything else will come and eat your tree. Yeah. So we need to see what happens with those.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a question about one of the earlier slides where you had your tree of all the different things that trees bring us, and it talked about crime prevention. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that's about?
It was a slide I borrowed, but I have wondered about that, and I don't know if it's the well-being thing. Yeah, there's a lot of research about urban trees, so it might be that, but I don't know more specifically.
No, that's fine. Sorry to pick up on that. I know I just thought whether it was a more direct thing, but yeah, it probably is that idea of making places nicer to be, and it sort of just raises everyone's well-being.
I think it is, yeah.
Why is it that cows are better for grazing and they eat less of that was really interesting about the difference between sheep and cows.
Yeah, I mean, there's many factors in it. They don't graze the same, that's certainly true, and they don't tend to eat right down to the very, very lowest part of the grasses. So they also therefore give an opportunity for other flora to take hold. But they also, because compared to a sheep, the pressure on the hoof is I don't know, set probably 2 orders of magnitude more than a sheep hoof. So it presses down, and any seeds are effectively planted into the soil, and then they can obviously grow, whereas they can compete therefore with the other flora that's present. Plus their manure also helps spread and propagate the other floral seed. So the combination of the way they graze and the way they spread the seed certainly helps give other species a chance, where you don't get such a monoculture as you do in agricultural grazing situations. Yeah.
And they're very low density.
Yeah, low density.
Yeah, low density grazing. So there's very, very, very fewer than you would typically see if it was a beef farm or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I've got other questions, but I don't want to just sit here and have a chat. I'm just really fascinated by it all. Pete or Ivana, is there anything you guys wanted to add, or is there anything coming in from anyone else had any sort of questions or comments they wanted to add? Anything that's come up during those presentations?
Well, there's a question in the chat from Debbie. So it's for Make It Wild. If you sell offset to other people, how do you offset your own emissions?
Oh, lovely. Well, we have a wind turbine and solar panels at home, and an electric vehicle. At our barn at Bankwoods, our main site, is entirely off grid, and all the electricity is from solar panels and batteries. As I said, we scythe. We don't use a petrol strimmer. So, and because our trees are planted in Nidderdale, we don't have to travel, to the tropics or somewhere. There's this whole move for planting trees in tropical places because they sequester more carbon. But then if you're buying them in the UK, somebody will have to go and monitor those trees. None of that with us. So, our remaining footprint, we plant 10,000 trees a year. Not all of those are offsetting other people's carbon footprint. Quite the opposite, really. How many we were in that? There's just so many that we're planting for our own purposes. I mean, the 20,000 at Sylvan aren't offsetting anyone else's carbon footprint. So I think we're probably net negative But thanks for the question.
Absolutely amazing, yeah. Ivana, was there some other bits in the chat you wanted to put forward?
Yeah, there's from Rumbeer, who's really inspiring from both sets of speakers. And a question, I think maybe that will be for both Lyndon and Make It World. Do you think that nature-based solutions will be a focus for COP26 in Glasgow this year at all? And maybe adding to that, are you doing anything to help make it the focus or part of it?
Lyndon says first.
Sorry, I was on mute, as is now popular in this part of the early 21st century. I mean, it's to be hoped that nature-based solutions are going to be a big thing at COP26. I know that the Peatland Restoration community is angling to get a peatland pavilion there, in which we will be able to promote the benefits of peatland restoration. But until we get a bit close to COP26, because there's still quite a lot to do between here and now, I couldn't tell you one way or another whether it's going to be a focus. It would be brilliant if it were, and we're certainly pushing for it to be so.
Yes, and certainly, I think whether it's COP26, it'll get mentioned or not. I think that there is definitely a trend now in the government starting to understand the need for change in agriculture, and to the grant systems will now not be purely based on owning land and subsidizing food production. It'll be based on so-called public goods. But I mean that I'm starting to see that can in fact mean nature-based solutions for land usage. So I think it's encouraging that there is at least an economic infrastructure being developed to help make the change, and not just be a focus on ever increasingly cheap food production. So I think there is a hope that things are going to be more focused on that going forward.
The announcement from George Eustace, Secretary of State for the Environment, earlier this month about the England Peatland Action Plan and the Woodland Plan was, although lacking in concrete commitments, it was just an amazing thing to see from that senior government figure actually coming out and saying so much about nature. I think the last time I can remember anybody that senior in government talking that much about the environment was probably Margaret Thatcher talking about banning CFCs. I thought that was a really positive step forward, albeit we'd always like to see more.
Yeah.
Can I add a sort of related question then, I guess, maybe for Lyndon, because I'm thinking we were hoping to have a speaker who would kind of explain a bit more broadly of what's covered by nature-based solutions, and unfortunately we were not able to get someone to do that. But I believe that the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust does quite a bit of other stuff besides peat restoration. So I think you work on seagrass, and so I just wonder if you want to mention a few other things.
It absolutely does do so very much more, but I'm so focused on peat, and I don't get enough time to look at what else everybody else is doing. There's a big thing about seagrass, which is another quite a big carbon store. I don't pretend to understand the mechanics of that. And also the Wildlife Trust has going forward a thing called Wild Ingleborough, where I think in conjunction with Natural England, we now own something like 60% of Ingleborough, which is just amazing. And we are going to be gradually making that wilder and wilder and wilder, which is an amazing thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of that. It's not something I'll have a huge amount of involvement in, but what an exciting time to be in nature.
Absolutely, it's absolutely amazing what you're all doing. There's a lovely comment in the chat as well from Alan saying, well done, make it wild. You exemplify doing what you can do right where you are, and you're doing a lot. Climate action needs to be local, part of each of our lifestyles, whatever that may mean, depending on our circumstances. I think that's absolutely right. It's such a brilliant thing to be able to do, to make all of that. I think for me, there's that perception that planting trees, it's a very slow process and it will take a long time for those trees to become a woodland with all the associated wildlife, but it just sounds like that's not necessarily the case. And if you get the right species, which obviously you guys have done that research, it's lovely to just think of it as not just lots of trees, because sometimes you can get, you know, trees that are planted for felling or whatever, and it's quite a kind of dry, almost sterile environment, isn't it? But it sounds like you guys have created so much more than just trees. It's such a brilliant thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we Sylvan, which as we call it, which is now our Sylvan Nature Reserve at Kirkhamerton, it's very, very much got the feel of a young woodland. You know, the canopy's closed overhead, there's a woodland floor, you know, there is regeneration, the tree seedlings are now growing. There's all sorts of, as well as insects and birds that I mentioned, you know, there's hare, deer have a sort of haven there from around all the arable that goes on. So and really it was at about 5 years probably that it felt like that, wasn't it? I mean, it's grown much more rapidly than typical because it's in such fertile soil, but the Woodland Trust had helped us with advice and some funding to start with, and when they came back after 5 years, their view was it looked like it had been growing for 10 years. So it has really, really grown well. But I mean, it's not quite a solution to climate change, but it can really support the ecological emergency, is just doing it in your garden. And I mean, I have a whole talk that I give to WIs and anyone who asks me really about bringing nature into your garden. And you can do it, you know, you just need a little tiny pond, a few flowering trees, fruiting trees, and you know, it's remarkable what you can do. So yeah, so thank you for that comment. It's lovely, and we are fortunate enough to be able to do it on a big scale. But you know, the other thing we do is we don't mow the lawn at home, and that's amazing. I don't know what it does about carbon, but it does a lot for insect life. So yeah, really, you know, there are things that people can do even if they can't do mass tree planting like we're doing.
I think there's some initiatives within local councils, aren't there, to leave vergeways unmown and stuff to try and encourage wildlife, which I think is a really good thing. We've got Adrian Lovett here tonight, who's actually quite involved in local regenerative agriculture, and he's just said thanks for the great presentations. Make it wild. Do you see ways of making it wild everywhere by spreading this kind of mindset onto agricultural land as well?
Oh, hi Adrian. Nice to see you. Well, I can't see you actually, but hello. Yes, I mean, we are always looking for the next piece of land to do the next project. But
also we've been contacted, and I think this is going to be a bit of a growing trend, by landowners who say farmers, and like for example, we have someone who's got 400 acres. He's farming it. It's mainly livestock, but he's now saying, well, I want to give 50 acres across to create a woodland and nature project, but I don't have the time or the inclination to do all of the background stuff and the administration of it, and the websites and everything else. Can we work in partnership, and can we sort of front it as a make it wild thing, but actually it'll be on the ground. It's actually down in Hampshire. It's nowhere near where we currently are. So yeah, that might be a model going forward to help other landowners give up some of their land for nature, which is, you know, it's music to our ears anyway. Yeah.
And I think the new, I mean, I haven't studied them, it isn't really my sort of thing, but the new agricultural sort of grant system, I think will help with that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's if you're trying to do rewilding at arable land that's been intensively chemically treated, it isn't a good start. So we've started at Bank Woods. It had been very benignly farmed, really. They just fairly lightly grazed it with sheep, and even up before we bought it, on the Google Maps, our bit was a bit sort of yellowy. Everyone else's fields were bright green, but it was a bit yellowy, hadn't been fertilized and herbicided. So that was a really good starting point for us. So for that side of things, I mean, probably for trees, well, you might be all right on a heavily chemically treated field, but yeah, for the rewilding side of things, that wouldn't be any good. So it's kind of poorer agricultural land is what we can use. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much. I think Adrian's had to pop off, but as it were. I know you're still there. I thought you were saying goodbye, Adrian. Sorry. Yes, so that's lovely. Thank you so much. And if we haven't got any other questions, I think we are going to move on to pledges now, just to make sure we've got enough time to have a good old chat. So Pete's just put the Jamboard for today's session, the sort of blank Jamboard, into the chat. So if we can split into breakout rooms, I'm going to split us all up into breakout rooms now. We can have a little bit of a look at those pledges, and yeah, see if we can get some stuff going. How many rooms should we have?
Yeah, so I've posted the Jamboard up there for anyone who hasn't been before. We're split out into breakout rooms, which Alison's doing. Excuse me, which Alison's doing just now. And we can use the board to pop down some pledges that may have been inspired from some of the speakers, some of what we've talked about, some of the Q&A tonight. So as a group, just come up with something you're comfortable doing. It could be some volunteering around a nature-based solution type project. Or it could be something that's completely different. It could be something else that's come up through the session. So we'll just have a look at that now. Alison.
Hi.
Shall I go and join the room?
Yeah, go on then. Just whichever
I'll
one.
join room 1 then.
Lovely.
I think Debbie's in 3, so you can grab.
Yeah, and Nirvana and yeah.
2 and 4. Yeah.
Cool.
Amen.
See you soon.
See you in a bit.
You're still with us, Oscar, Jane and Manish? We're making cups of tea, maybe. Well, if you are there, feel free to pop into a room and get some pledges going. I'm going to go and see how people are doing in different rooms. Hi, have we managed to get the Jamboard link?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, but now I've lost my Zoom. Oh, there I am. Yes, don't know quite how I would do both at once, but
I mean, I can be scribe if that helps. If you guys want to talk and I'll write, you can do that. If that helps, or if you'd rather do it yourselves, totally up to you.
I can't really think of anything more I could pledge than
you're doing quite a lot, aren't you?
I think we probably are.
What sort of have you got any new projects on the horizon, like new bits of land you've got your eye on, or anything like that? I suppose what you were saying about the new model of helping farmers might be a good one, mightn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, that's a good one to go for, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we're talking to two now who are interested in this partnership approach. So maybe that would be a good pledge to say, try to expand that line of our endeavours, really.
So is that sort of using the Make It Wild branding to help them get interest in it and funding?
Yeah,
or what?
I mean, it may even develop into something as almost as full-blooded as a franchise idea, really. I mean, we haven't actually developed that yet, but it looks like it might be heading in that direction, because that might be the most appropriate way to take it. Yeah.
Brilliant. How about you, Vinishri? Have you got some stuff, some cogs turning there? Looks like you're thinking deeply.
I've been working, the recent project that I'm working on, I think that has really got me thinking. So I'm a student at Glasgow School of Arts, and the project that I'm working on is how can we assist the SMEs and local businesses in their net zero transition. And the research has taken me to various places, like I've been speaking to carbon management officers and these local business people, and even people who are very conscious while they make their decisions while buying things. And I've seen the insights are very, makes me think how much are we aware of, and how far behind we're still in the progress that we should have made. So I think my pledge would be to inspire people and collaborate and collect as many voices we can in climate action. I think that would be my pledge, because it has really just the understanding of it. The research has really made me worried. Climate anxiety is catching up. So yeah, I speak to my daughter about it, and she's like, "That's your problem. Your generation has done it, and and you have to solve it."
Not wrong.
Yeah, that's very true. Like it's our responsibility, and the onus is on us. So I think talk to as many people as I can and inspire people to join in. That would be my pledge.
Good. Yeah.
Brilliant. That sounds fabulous. I'm going to nip out and just check there's any other rooms that need any help, and I'll pop your bits on the Jamboard when I do that, but feel free to keep chatting. You'll get a little message when it says you've got a few minutes left. So yeah, I'll speak to you back in the main room.
Okay, thank you.
it's great to see.
Great.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Thank you.
Right, guys, I just started pop in and see how it's going and see if you'd managed to get the link to the Jamboard working.
We haven't, Alison, but I've made a note of what we've pledged tonight. So if it's okay, I'll just email it over to you.
You can do. I mean, I can if it's quick ones, I can pop them on now. I've got it open.
Oh yeah, okay then. So so we got Rambia, which was he's going to cut down on his car use and research using electric vehicles and where the charging points are. He's also looking to reduce his red meat consumption and looking to go sort of vegetarian and vegan, sort of more in the medium to long term.
Yeah, fabulous.
Then moving on to Lyndon, he's looking to restore more peatland areas. He also just reminded us about checking that when you buy compost in the garden centre, just checking that it's peat free.
Yeah, that's such an important one because so many of them aren't. And Lyndon, would you say it's a fair rule to go by that if it doesn't say it's peat free, it probably has peat in it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because a lot of them just don't say anything, and I stand there like reading the whole thing, going, "Where does it say it?" And yeah, it's a hard one. And, do you guys do sort of awareness raising around that?
Yeah, and we're going to be stepping that up. You'll have seen, well, you might not have noticed, but George Eustace was announcing a ban on peat in compost, or consultation around a ban.
Yeah, there should definitely be.
I think he's coming in by, I think it was 2025 they were looking to get it done by. We'll certainly be encouraging people to respond to that consultation in support of the ban, because there's really no excuse for it. And
such a precious thing, isn't it?
We use something like, I think it's over 60% of the peat used in compost in this country is used by domestic gardeners. It's not agriculture, it's horticulture.
Right, wow. That's really, really interesting. Ranbir, I wanted to say, was it you that mentioned that this is your first time?
Yeah, I didn't know it was a series of events. And then at the start, when you said pledges from last time, I thought, oh God, have I missed some?
Well, you have, but they're all available to look at. So I'll let me think where the best place for you to go is. I've got on my organisation's website, I've got a link that's got all of them to download. So I mean, a lot of them are the things you've just said. So you're definitely on the right track with things like electric cars and cutting down your meat and dairy. But if you want to have a full, because we've had food, we've had travel, we've had stuff as in like clothes and gadgets and stuff like that. So we've had lots of different ones. This is obviously session 6, so you can have a look on there. So I'll put the link into the chat and you can have a look on there and see, get inspiration on some others. But the ones you've said are exactly the sort of thing that people are looking at. So that's really good.
My motivation is that I'm studying sustainability science part-time. And part of it is writing post notes in the style of government parliamentary briefings on nature-based solutions and things like that. So that's my motivation for attending. So I'm learning
how did you find us, just out of interest?
I might just get suggestions on Eventbrite based on similar sort of things I've attended.
Yeah.
So my evenings just tend to be like staring at Zoom. So, I mean, it's good professional development. So
yeah, that's fair enough.
But yeah, I'll check that out.
Brilliant. I'll put it in the chat now. That should just take you to the place where you can download all the different pledges, all the different Jamboards. I will leave you guys to it unless you've got any other pledges for me to pop onto the Jamboard.
Yeah, just me. So it's Elizabeth.
Sorry, of course.
Not David.
I'm thinking you're not called David. You might be, but you know.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and create a bit of a wetland sort of pond area in my garden, attracting some different nature plants and wildlife. And,
amazing.
I'm sure you can find resources about how to do that on the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust website.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll have a look.
That's a brilliant idea. I guess it's planting trees is a lot easier than making peat. It takes a lot longer by the sounds of it. It's not like, oh look, there's 5 years and there's lots of stuff. It's a slightly longer thing, but But yeah, I mean, like, is there any way to sort of build habitats that would have that, to facilitate that in future, or is it more just about trying to save what we've got?
At a personal level, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to do a thing like that. We're working on a massive scale. You know, we've done 31,000 hectares of blanket bog, so we've still got another 60 to go.
But is that you putting something there that wasn't there before, or is that you restoring what was
That's restoring
failing?
what was there before.
It's restoration.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's the kind of thing that you can set out to go,
That
right, let's
scratch.
create a peatland. It takes too long.
Nobody touched this for 4,000 years. Basically, isn't it? That's what you're hoping. Yeah. It's a bit of a, what do they call it when it's a project that's going to last for more than a person's lifetime? I can't remember what they call it now. Generational or something like that?
Yeah. Well, I think this goes beyond generational.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's an epoch, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a geological age.
Yeah. So it really is about saving what we've got, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Get out there and enjoy it. They are, I think, with so many, I understand why we do it, but when we just look at habitats through the lens of the things that they can do for us in terms of climate change or what have you, we diminish them to a degree. We should just get out and enjoy them for being beautiful, amazing places, whether it's a peat bog or a woodland or a meadow, or even just a local bit of scrub. There's still wildlife value in hawthorn just growing in some grass somewhere.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Just nature for nature's sake, and just to know it's there and let it do its thing and not sort of faff about with it, I think is sometimes the most important thing. Obviously with what you're doing, it needs help because of the state it's got to, but sometimes the best thing we can do is just nothing, isn't it? Just leave it to it. Absolutely. That's fabulous. I think we're going to be pulling people out shortly. Yeah, we've got a few more minutes, so I'll leave you guys to have a little final chat while I go back into the main room and just check everything's all right, and then we'll be pulling you out in about 3 or 4 minutes. So I'll speak to you soon.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hello all. Looks like we've got a lovely Jamboard filling up here. I can see some brilliant pledges coming on. So I think we're all back now. So well done, everyone. That looked like a really good session. Can you see the Jamboard I've got up on the screen?
Not yet.
No. Maybe I'm not showing. There we go. Let's try that. Yep. Fabulous. So I think that's really good. I'm really pleased with that. There's some fantastic ones on there. We've got some really good general ones and some really specific ones to nature-based solutions. I think my favourite one is the idea of Elizabeth's idea of making a wildlife habitat wetland in her garden.
Oh yeah,
sounds absolutely brilliant. Love that idea. Awareness raising campaigns, yeah. Peat-free compost. That's such a big one. I did ask Lyndon actually when we were in that breakout room. I always wonder whether it's a case of, you know, how to know whether something's peat-free unless it says it is. And his guidance was if compost doesn't say peat-free on it, it won't be. So avoid it unless it says peat-free. Which I think is a really even just that takeaway. I find that really useful because I often find myself scanning all the bits of blurb about all sorts of things and wondering whether any of it means anything. Yeah, we've got Make It Wild talking about expanding their projects into supporting farmers to be wild, which is fantastic. Habitat creation, yeah, obviously, yeah, not only tree planting, there's so much that can be done as well, isn't there? I think is there information on the SNC's website about other I keep talking to you about beaver dams, don't I, Ivana? And you keep saying no, that's not. No, I don't know why. What organisation was it that was doing work with beaver dams? Can you remind me?
So I know there's a group in Pickering, but there are some, you know, there's several trials ongoing and around the country. I'm sure that Yorkshire Wildlife Trust have a beaver project as well, actually.
I know the one you mean in Pickering, but it's not us, I'm afraid.
No, not necessarily that one, but I'm sure
we're beavered up yet.
Oh, I thought there was something in the latest magazine. Okay, maybe I'm imagining it somewhere else.
I think there may be one on the cards shortly, but I don't think we've got any beavers at the moment.
Well, we can all keep an eye on that and have a look at the I suppose if you Google beaver dams Pickering, something good will come up, won't it? So we can maybe have a look at that. That sounds like they do amazing things, just again left to themselves and allowed to, don't they? So that would be something we could all have a little look at.
And there's actually, it might be worth mentioning, there's a company sort of based off Scarborough or Whitby, which actually works on planting seagrass, and then you can sort of support them by buying sea salt, which is kind of flavored with the seagrass, and it's a way of, again, they are basically promoting carbon storage and sort of recreating what used to be there, so restoring habitats, which of course is good for the marine wildlife, and it's great for you know, and it works for people as well by generating a product that you know, we can use for flavoring food. So it's kind of triple benefits in just one thing.
Brilliant. Do you have a name or anything we can use as a search? I've just put in Scarborough seagrass and haven't really got anything useful.
Okay, I'll try and quickly find it.
That'd be great. Yeah, or we can always pop it.
It's the second time I've talked about that company today. I did in some earlier training as well. I've got it on my other laptop. I'll pick it up if you can't find it, Ivana, but you'll probably be able to find it if I do that.
Oh, fab. It's funny how things happen like that, isn't it?
Just quickly, we had something come up in our conversation. I know we haven't got too much time, but Lyndon, this probably isn't a a quick answer, but you mentioned anaerobic conditions, and we were talking about methane in our group. Is there also some methane produced when you're growing peatlands? So is that a problem?
Yes, there is. It's the science around the fluxes between carbon dioxide absorption and methane emissions are at the moment. The jury's still out. Broadly speaking, methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, but remains in the atmosphere for a very much shorter space of time. We think in the longer term, the amount of carbon removed by peatland generation is higher than the amount of carbon emitted by peatland generation.
Just sort of methane equivalent, I guess.
Yeah, and there's mad little things like there's a species of sphagnum called cuspidatum, which, as I understand it, hosts a methanotrophic bacteria. So that's bacteria that eats methane. So although the peatland is generating methane, it's also hosting a bacterium that consumes the methane as it is emitted.
Oh, that's incredible, isn't it?
Isn't it mad?
That is completely mad. I remember, I don't know whether we've still got Adrian. Yeah, we have. I remember Adrian talking in a previous session about, I know this sounds slightly a tangent, but about offsetting or reducing the amount of methane that cows emit through feeding them seaweed. Was it, Adrian? A certain type of seaweed, if memory serves, but it sounds like a similar
it was in Australia, but
yeah.
I think there's research being done in England to see whether it could work here.
Yeah,
I'd heard something about feeding just ground up charcoal to cows.
Wow.
Something like that, so that it would actually just absorb the methane as it was.
Yeah, biochar is good for that.
Yeah.
See, there's all these solutions, aren't there? It's complex stuff, but when you get into it, there's always a way around it, isn't there? Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that, guys. But I think we're about on time. I'm just going to come back to our presentation. I think most of you know that this is our last session for a couple of months. We're taking a summer break so we can all go out and enjoy the sunshine and get back into nature as much as we possibly can. We will have our first session, and we've got planned for the 21st of September, and we do say the topics to be confirmed here, but we're pretty sure it's going to be around COP26 and how we can all get involved. And so if you guys, we'd love you to stay in touch over the summer. Really appreciated your input and your contributions tonight. We'll put the Jamboard as usual. We'll publish that in the various different ways that we do, and we've got the Facebook page and everything, and we have our Slack channel and our mailing list if you do want to keep in touch. And just thank you so much for coming and for giving up your evenings, and thank you so much especially to our speakers Lyndon and Helen and Chris for Make It Wild. It's been so fantastic to hear about the work you're doing, and keep it up is all I can say. And yeah, absolutely brilliant. If everyone can go out and have a look at what Lyndon and Chris and Helen are doing, and get involved and support in any way you can, that would be fabulous. And really pleased to see such brilliant pledges. And I've just shared, I'll do it again actually, I've just shared with Ranbir the pledges that we've had previously, but I'll do that again for everyone now because that was in the breakout room. So if you are looking for inspiration on any of the others, then the sort of little roundup of what we've achieved over the last 6 months, you can have a look. It looks like you might have some, what have we got going in the chat? Oh, just some thank yous, that's lovely. Oh yeah, and yeah, as Ivana says, sorry Ivana. Do you want to, because I'm not very good on York, do you want to do give us a little bit of information on York Environment Week so people can have a look forward to that for us?
So I think we talked about it in the breakout room rather than the full room. So I just thought I'd flag it up so that the next session will be part of York Environment Week, which is sort of York focused, but it's part of a bigger national initiative, which will be called, I believe, Big Great Green Week. Anyone can remember? I keep getting those adjectives mixed. It's a nightmare for non-natives to try and get them in the right order. But it's a whole sort of week of events around the country between 18th and 26th of September. So there'll be lots going on, and it will be very much focusing on climate, what we do, how as a civic society we can basically contribute to the COP process and make sure that the politicians meeting there do actually come up with some strong actions, and rather than just have nice words, actually do something concrete. So should be a good one.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Ivana. Yeah, I just put a ridiculously long link for that in the chat, and then I think Ranbir has put a much shorter and less weird link in there. For it is the Great Big Green Week. So that's brilliant. Thanks for that, Ranbir. Fantastic. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I think we'll leave it there. Bang on 9 o'clock. There's little bit of daylight left. I'm going to go and water my garden. Maybe you guys can all go out and have a little bit of time outside as well before we lose the light. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and enjoy your summers.
Yes, and thank you for putting that link to the Great Yorkshire Creature Count, Lyndon. Yes, definitely. People should do that because it's great. I did it last year and it's good fun.
It's this weekend.
That's
it's
something to keep us busy this weekend.
Yeah. Find out what's lurking around in your garden.
That sounds like fun. Maybe I'll get the kids on that. Fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening and a brilliant summer, and hopefully we'll see some of you back in September.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.